How are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Nice evening.
You too. Boy, delighted to see a good chunk of people here. Here's our pie chart. How are you? Good to see you.
Oh,
Hey, how you doing, Ralph?
Good.
I'm Brian Holder.
Brian? All right. All right, nice to meet you.
My name is Robert Fairchild. I'm running for City Council in Bluffs.
All right, thanks for coming out.
You're welcome. I'm gonna be filming.
Jen Benson, Jen, and Mimi Dobson.
And Donna Baldwin. Three women are up for that at Ocean.
Yep, they will meet on Friday and make the call. Maybe hire him again.
There are good attorneys out there. I think.
Sure, I'd like to quit having to bring them in though. I don't really like the HR side.
Well, I know Andrew's grabbing a couple more, so if you didn't get a copy of the pie chart, he'll come back in with it, and he'll have one for you. But I think I'll go ahead and get started, since we're just a couple minutes past 9 o'clock. I am truly excited to be here today. And I'll tell you a short personal story as to why. This issue is actually one of the things that made me most excited about the idea of possibly running for state auditor. I had been in the Attorney General's office for 8 years, doing criminal prosecution, and the truth is, prosecution is pretty dark. Even when you have a good day at the office, everyone is still upset when it's over, and you can't really make things better. All you can do in a prosecution is make something really terrible less bad, if that makes sense. And I was noticing that was kind of wearing on me, that it was sort of changing my perspective, because what I was doing was criminal law day in, day out. Folks like Matt, the county attorney, you get to mix it up a little bit with some of the stuff on the civil side, hopefully prevent some bad things from happening. But in my little division in the Attorney General's office, it was just bad news every day. And I'm someone that is more of an optimist. I noticed that I was starting to be less of an optimist. And when I noticed that, it really made me look for something else maybe that I could be doing. And when I discovered that the auditor's office has the ability to make efficiency recommendations to help make government actually better, but that it wasn't doing it, that to me was a really exciting opportunity, something that we could do in that office to actually make government work better across the state of Iowa. And so I'm really excited about being here today because that's what this project is all about, actually making government operate better, doing something new, giving people new opportunities and new knowledge in order to save taxpayer money, which too is something that's just inarguably a good thing. It should be uniting for anyone, no matter what your political views are. The idea that we want to reduce waste comes first, and then we can argue about whether or not we want to build a new park or hire a new sheriff's deputy or have a tax cut, right? Those are great arguments to make, but we have to save money before we can have that argument sometimes. And so this is really exciting to me because it's oriented towards doing that. We're doing something in this office that it hasn't done before. And I'm glad that you're all out here. The reason that we're doing these town halls is I want to hear from you when you've had a chance to look through that document, our pie chart, public innovation and efficiency. I want to hear from you your ideas for what can make it better. I want to hear your questions about how the process will work. And we're doing these now before we really start getting rolling on this because I'm a believer in the idea of constant improvement. That document is a living document that we want to have When we get new ideas for how to save money, we want to add them. If we have some that just aren't working or no longer relevant, we want to remove them. But we want to get some feedback on this project now before we start actually executing on it by sending it out to cities. So I appreciate you all coming out to help with that process. So a lot of credit also, Lillian didn't come with us today, but Lillian Sanchez is an executive assistant in our office who has done the lion's share of the work in putting that document together, collecting those ideas, getting it formatted, and also working with Jacob Lloyd, who does some of the IT work in our office, because he's working on the back end of this. The way that we were basically going to do this is a near final draft. We expect to make a lot of changes between when we're actually asking cities and counties and state agencies to fill it out and today. But we wanted to walk you through that process. So if I know a lot of you are already looking at the checklist, the pie chart, that's great. As you can see, we've got it divided into a few different categories. One is just really some common sense categories, things that probably a lot of the people in this room have already heard of, they already know about. But it's also those things that, you know what, they're a little bit hard to do. Just over the last few weeks, I've been trying to get myself to remember every night before I leave the state capitol building to unplug my extension cord. I've got one plug that goes in there and all the other electronics plug into it. And I'm trying to remember to unplug it every night because we're wasting taxpayer money if we leave it plugged in, right? Well, it's going to be easier for us to remember to do those basic things if every year we have to check a box that becomes publicly available as to whether or not we are doing those things. Is it a little bit of a pain in the butt for folks who are in local and county government? Yep, probably. But it's also something where they can take pride in doing the right thing and also knowing that the public gets to know they're doing the right thing. So there's kind of two ways to look at it. You could look at it like a pessimist or you could look at it like an optimist. And I'm optimistic that most people will say, oh good, at least this way if I'm doing this, I'll get some credit for it too. And what we're going to do with this, it's going to be a part of the annual audit that'll go out that every city, every county, most state agencies have got to do. They're going to be asked to fill that out. We're going to have an online submission form. So even though there'll be a PDF, and by the way, if you want to have a copy, you can go to auditor.iowa.gov/pi, and you'll be able to download the document right there. But the way it'll work will be with annual audits, folks will be asked to go through the chart, look at what they're doing and what they're not doing, and then there's going to be an online submission form where they can send in the chart, where they can check yes for the things that they're doing and not check the ones that they aren't. And because we're going to be submitting it online, it's going to save time, it's going to save expense, but it's also going to give us a lot of flexibility to do more good with it. Because all of that data will automatically come into a spreadsheet where we're able to look at it and compare it. So we're going to be able to see what of these items are actually being pursued by more cities and counties. Which of these items are sort of being ignored? Why are they being ignored? Maybe we can try to figure that out. You know, what can we do to make this one more used? Maybe the phrasing of the item on the checklist is confusing and we need to clarify what we're talking about. But by having that automatically tabulated by submitting it online, that'll be easier. The other thing that's going to be exciting is it lets us have a pie contest every year. Who's eating the most pie? Public innovations and efficiencies, right? So when we are getting that information in from counties and cities, we can compare across government entities to see which counties are our highest performing counties, which cities are our highest performing cities, which small towns are doing a good job. And it's also good for internally. If you've got a team that's focused on doing this, you can ask yourself, you know, we might not be interested in comparing ourselves with other counties. God forbid we continue to have a lot of natural disasters like have struck counties near here recently. But there might be a year where you're really just more interested in comparing your own county to how your county did last year or 2 years ago than comparing it to other counties, right? And that's fine if that's the way you want to look at that too. But it'll allow you to do that because you can see every year how your county has progressed in adding more of these items to their pie chart and checking more of those boxes. I also think that one of the other things we want to do every year is make sure that we're getting everybody's pie recipes. So if you have an idea, if you have a plan, a way to save money, we want you to tell that to us. We want to add it to the chart. We want to give you credit for it when we add it to the chart. We are just starting the process of doing some of that outreach now. But and as you can see, so I think it's on maybe the 4th page, there's one item on there in relation to Scott County. And this is one of the things that the items that I talked about during the campaign, that I lifted up as an opportunity, as an example of a local government doing a good job. They switched from dual stream to single stream recycling collection. You're going to save $2.5 million over 8 years, and it also created 11 jobs. So just things like that we can add to our list, we can spread those ideas around. And then, I was able to speak with Kathy Morris. She's the director of waste management over in Scott County. I called her up. I said, hey, I've known about this project for a while. Is it still looking good? Is it still going well over there? She said, yeah, it is. We're really happy with it. We're very proud of the work we did. I told her what we were doing, and I said, I would like to include the work you have done as an example of innovation at the county level. She said, well, I would be honored if you would do that. I said, can I put your phone number in there? She said, you absolutely can. And she is happy to take phone calls from folks in other counties and cities around the state who might be interested in doing what Scott County did. It's a good way to save money. But we want to collect those ideas, those recipes for public innovations and efficiencies from around the state and add them to this chart year after year after year. There's a similar effort that's run by the University of Minnesota. They regularly do small government innovation awards. Some of them have to do with saving taxpayer money, some of them don't. So some of those ideas are applicable and they'll get incorporated into our spreadsheet, the ones that have won those awards over the years in Minnesota. Others won't. But I know that there's people who do a great job in local and county government all over the state of Iowa. And so we want to collect those ideas from folks too and add them to the pie chart so that when we send out the new iteration of it every year for each audit, there's more ideas on there and more opportunities for people to do something new and innovative to save money. That's about all I wanted to run on for. I'm happy to tell folks more about other efforts that we have going on in the office, but mostly I came out here to get your ideas, to get your feedback, and to ask your questions about what this process is going to look like as we're actually, we start to execute it later on this year. So with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Yes, sir, in the back.
Okay, the state of Iowa gives corporate welfare to companies in the state of Iowa. What are your plans to do with the corporate welfare in the state of Iowa?
I don't think that it would be a part of our pie checklist. I don't think it'd be a piece of what local and county government does. I do think, and I campaigned on the idea that we do need to have an examination of the effectiveness of the corporate tax credits that have been getting handed out over the years. And that is something that I plan to dig into and try to provide some facts for the legislature and the governor to consider as they go forward. Yes, Matt.
Rob, do you anticipate, is this, kind of this checklist, is this something every employee is doing, or is this something the county is doing as part of an audit, or
So
mishmash of that? How do you anticipate that works?
I think that's a really good question. We're going to be open to having it done different ways by county. The way I anticipate it is as a county gets their audit, the county will fill out one of these for that county. And it doesn't mean, it might be that some folks in the county are doing a good job of following what's on the checklist and others are not. But some of the items on there, like you'll notice, there's a piece of that involves putting together an energy management team. I think if a county has a point person who can run around and actually make sure these practices are being followed, then the county has a higher degree of reliability in answering their questions. And I know from having, I know that in every county in the state of Iowa, you can find someone who wants to run around and check on everybody else's business, right? I know that. And so, you know, it might be that someone gets assigned, it might be that someone gets assigned to do that job who's not excited about it. If you have assigned that job to someone who's not excited about it, maybe think of assigning someone else, right? But there's gonna be other people too. I know there's enough people who are excited about saving money and doing something new that they'll be excited to do this. And so if each county has someone who sort of says, you know, I'll run point on this, I will take a couple nights every year, or an hour in the evening every year and go to all the buildings after the offices are closed and see if people are unplugging their machines, you know, that sort of thing. So and here's the other piece of this. Part of the reason we're doing these town halls is to get questions like that asked. It's a good question. If there's other ways of doing it, if there's other counties that have better ways of doing it, we're probably gonna be open-minded to a lot of those too. But my thinking is, each entity that gets audited fills out one pie chart for itself, and at some point, you know, we come in or someone comes in, and it could be internally, but there could be an internal audit of whether or not the boxes that are getting checked are being accurately checked. But beyond that, my tendency is to think the entity that does a single pie chart fills it out, and they're sort of accountable for that. Another way to account for that too is to subdivide. You'll notice with LED conversions, it is such a huge money saver and such a straightforward, easy to understand thing to do that we really wanted to incentivize people to convert their lights to LEDs. And so the way we did that in the pie chart is, you'll notice that there are actually 3 boxes that you get to check. If you get to a full 100% conversion to LEDs, that means you get to check 3 boxes every year instead of just 1. So another piece of it might be, you know, you go down by the number of buildings you have. Maybe 2 years down the road, we adjust this to say, you know, 50% of your buildings have their equipment unplugged at night, 75% of your buildings have their equipment unplugged overnight. We'll make adjustments like that because, again, you know, this is a new thing. The state auditor's office, the state has never done this before. We are not going to get it perfectly right on the first time, but we'll be perfect probably after about 3 years. So that's the plan.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Anybody else have any questions? I'm also here to take your concerns. If you're looking at some of this and being like, I don't know how that's going to work.
All right.
Yes.
I'm Melvin Hauser, I'm county auditor.
Yeah.
Glad to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for your time on the phone.
You bet. Kind of different than this, but the legislature passes some bills, particularly the city school elections, where they, you know, combine them, which creates a lot of inefficiencies for the school districts. That's one example. What part can the state auditor's office play in helping direct or lobby the legislators and let them know that, hey guys, what you're doing is gonna cost more money? It may look like it could save money by combining those 2 elections, but some of the small cities and all the school districts are gonna be paying more.
Yeah, that's a good question too, and I was
And
looking.
it doesn't fall in line with yours.
No, but I was looking for a pen, Melvin, while you mentioned it, because I need to make a note on here as I do these for the rest of the weekend. Part of what thanks, appreciate it. I do think that the state auditor does have a role in public policy making, and I've said that before. I have been disappointed in the past at how much state auditors have hamstrung themselves in their willingness to comment on public policy. Every year, you have our state auditors have gotten up, and after the budget is passed, they have made a pronouncement, you know, at the end of the year about what that looks like, how it performed. But they don't do anything to talk about what has gone into the budget, which the comparison I make is it's like a watchdog that barks as the burglars are on their way out of the house, right? We got to do better than that. We ought to have somebody in there who, when there's stuff that's clearly wrong-headed and clearly wasteful, we should be talking about that before it becomes public policy, before they pass the law. Here's the wrinkle with that. I also want to be careful, and I want to make sure that this is an office where people, when it has something to say, when the state auditor has something to say, they can trust that it's been based on fact and based on study, right?
Right.
And a lot of times the public policy piece moves faster than fact and study. So there's going to be, of all the policy-making decisions where money could be getting wasted, a lot of them are going to get decided and maybe passed into law faster than the auditor's office can really collect information to have a comment about whether or not it is a good idea or not.
I think the federal government, whether they've got that in place or not, but there was supposed to be a fiscal analysis of any bill
Right.
that they passed, whether they're doing that or not, probably not.
And that happens at the state level too. The Legislative Services Agency normally does a fiscal analysis for stuff, but similar to the recent federal tax bill, that didn't happen with the property tax bill that they just passed, because they're trying to get out of there right now, to get out by Saturday, I think. And so they're working to get it done,
Right.
but they didn't have time with the property bill, with the amendments they made, to actually get a fiscal note done before they voted on it.
And there's 3 o'clock in the morning, transparency was not.
Right. So I take your point to heart. I do like the idea
But I
of the
know
state
that
auditor
the
that's more
Department of
outspoken about
Revenue,
that.
or the Department of Management, some of those other offices or departments aren't able to do any lobbying.
Right.
But the Secretary of State and the State Auditor's Office surely can.
Yeah, and it's a good point. As far as the pie chart goes, I don't know if we'd ever have a situation where those things get added on here. Because I don't think, this is not to make recommendations to the state government as a whole, to the
Right,
legislature on
right.
policy questions.
Yeah.
It's really for state agencies and state departments, and it's for counties and then local entities and whatever else gets their regular audits, but,
Thank you.
yeah, you bet.
On elections, is there a standard, I assume there is not, a standard fee that the county auditors charge to hold elections? I tell you, in Council Bluffs city elections, I think the only increase in cost other than normal salary increases was a 7% increase for poll workers, roughly, I think it's 75 cents to go up to
Well, they were working
$11 or
for
something.
$8 an hour, that'd be about, I think about a $20
Cost
a
of
day
election is more
increase.
than tripled in that same time frame.
Say that again.
Well, when I first started running, the cost of the city election was about 25,000, now it's closer to 80
Wow. You know,
in 15-year time frame.
okay. Do you have any idea as to why that is?
I just get a bill.
Could be a good thing for my office to dig into, though. That sounds really bizarre. A thought,
Assumptions, but
a thought would be, we all use paper ballots in Iowa. If there's been a consolidation in the market for companies that print paper ballots, they may have increased their prices. That's been happening in a lot of other industries, but I don't know if there's been public policy changes in Iowa that affect that. I don't have an answer. It's a good question, though. Something worth digging into. Can you borrow your pen again? Write that one down.
which kind of was a problem with property tax. They were talking about a reverse referendum. If you went over 2%, well, for Council Bluffs, that would mean that you could, 1% was equivalent to about 400,000, but I'd have to pay 80,000 to hold the reverse referendum.
They did end up taking the reverse referendum out of the new one, yeah. That's my understanding. Maybe it'll go back in today, who knows? What did you say it was?
It was in the 20s, it's been, can't give you exact numbers, but it was the 20,000 per election, so if it was primary and general, it was 50, and it's closer to 80.
And that was since, when was it, how much was it?
I've been doing it for 24 years, but.
Okay,
I
24.
can't tell the exact dates, I just know it's exponentially going up.
Okay, can I hold on to this for a little while? Oh, look at that, you got two. I took a note of that and I'll dig into it. Thank you for that point. Anybody else, questions, comments, concerns about how this process will work? If you really want to get into the nuts and bolts, there's two options for the way we do this. One is we actually put it as a part of our regular audit, meaning this, if you have a private CPA firm that does your audit, they too will have to provide this and have them fill this out. If we did that, it would go into other business where they are not required to actually conduct an audit of your pie chart. It's just something that they have you fill out, or other information, excuse me, That's something that they will have you fill out, and then they will include it in their report. Another option is we handle it entirely internally. We send it out to private CPA firms, and we make sure that they all contact their clients and give their clients the link to where they can fill it out online. And then, we keep track of who's filling it out. We haven't decided which direction we're going to go in. I lean towards, rather than having it included in the audit where CPA firms around the state have to put it in their report, I lean towards doing it internally, where we just ask them all, hey, tell your client about this. Please give us their contact information so we make sure we can get it out to everybody. But we haven't made a decision on that yet either. And I'm open to input on that idea too, pros and cons.
You would expect that a lot of this just day-to-day operational stuff would be part of policy, where you can just create within your handbook or something.
Right.
Do you have any boilerplate templates that counties might,
Great idea.
work on to just put it in your policy and review it every year?
That's a great idea. I'm going to do that.
That's why you do this town halls, right?
Yes, right.
It's a good thing I showed up. Boy.
I always like to say, two minds are better than one, and however many we got in here is better than two, so. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Because then it creates a little bit of a fallback, like, we're not just checking the box, it's in the rule book,
yeah.
you're expected
This is
to
what
do
you're
it.
supposed to do.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for being here today. My name's Brian Jack Holder. I've run for the U.S. House of Representatives 3 times for the 3rd Congressional District. And I was looking at your website last night. It's very well constructed. I want to thank you for that. But it says your mission is to serve as the taxpayer's watchdog. Our work is to help ensure government officials use taxpayer dollars for the intended purposes to benefit the public. Now, you may not be aware of this, but Iowa Public Television has excluded myself 3 times over the last 3 election cycles, even though I've qualified for the ballot for Congress. I have not been allowed to participate in the Iowa press debates. Now, Iowa Public Television is a nonprofit 501c3 or 4 organization, and the Johnson Amendment, part of federal law, says that nonprofits are not allowed to support or oppose candidates for public office. Yet they've excluded me and all the other independent and third-party candidates, but they've only let the Republicans and the Democrats participate in the Iowa press debate. So obviously they're supporting those candidates and opposing all others. I think they should lose their tax-exempt status for picking and choosing participants in the debate because they're rigging our elections by determining and censoring and segregating me and others. So is there something you can do about this? Can you investigate? Can you send them a letter? Because they've already told me that they will not allow me a hearing in front of the television board to challenge their criteria. So they're denying me due process, and they're violating my substantive right to liberty of speech. So
it was Brian?
Brian,
All right, so thanks for running.
thank you. And I'm running again next year.
All right. I'm sympathetic to what you're saying. Personally, I think the more debate we have, the more voices that we have, the closer we get to hearing truth and getting the policy right. And so I get your point. I like the idea of including more voices. In terms of my official role, if you read Chapter 11 of the Iowa Code, we have a very limited ability to look into entities that receive public funds if they are not themselves public entities. As I sit here, I have not thought about that. I have not run that through Iowa Code Chapter 11.23 and 24, which are the most relevant. But off the top of my head, I'll just think out loud about it. My tendency is to think that we probably don't have an ability in the official office to do that. Our purview is really on financial statements, whether or not they're being presented correctly, embezzlement or other misuse of money that may or may not be criminal, but comes close to criminal. And again, it's one of those things where policy-wise, we don't tend to, I don't know if we have much authority to comment on policy. We can comment on policy when it comes to spending money effectively. I don't think that this fits into that bailiwick, though. I do understand your point. I do understand your frustration.
Well, you're an attorney, I have a law degree.
All right.
Why shouldn't me and other candidates that qualify for the ballot be able to participate in a public debate on public TV? You yourself have been on Iowa Press.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying,
Yeah.
as state auditor, I don't believe that the state auditor's machinery, the office itself, has a role to poke around on that issue.
So do I go to the Internal Revenue Service and file a complaint against public television for violating the Johnson Amendment? Do I have to bring a private lawsuit?
I guess a counterpoint would be that because the Fairness Doctrine was repealed in 1986 or 87, if I'm out of public television, I'd look at the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine and say we no longer have an obligation to present all viewpoints.
Well, I have a letter
personally-
from public television. They rely upon a Supreme Court case from 1998, which started in 92, where a Nazi ran for Congress in Arkansas as an independent candidate. Now, last time, I was a major party candidate for this office. I was not a third party, I was a major party. Now, they misinterpret this case to exclude me, and my only recourse is to, file a suit?
Sure. Well, here's what we'll do. I want to make sure, I came
And
up
I
to
didn't mean
talk
to
about
take
the
your time.
efficiency issue. No, it's okay to take my time.
I've
It's an important question.
Spent 5 years of my life running for
Yeah.
Congress and haven't gotten to speak on public television in a public debate.
Right.
5 years of my life.
And I
Where's
guess,
the democracy?
Brian, the other piece of that is too, I want to make sure we can handle all the questions that we got before we get on the road that we.
Oh, that's fine. I'm done. I've made my point.
Okay, all right.
And I thank you for listening.
And I wish you luck.
Thank you.
In your mission there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, hold
so,
on one second. So you've asked one question.
yeah.
I
Let
want to
somebody
make sure
else.
we have everybody else have an opportunity to get their question asked first. So does anybody else who hasn't asked a question yet have one? Yes?
My name is Karen Carr. I'm a retired paraeducator. I worked in Council Bluffs and Live Central and for the Area 13. And I'm thinking that the efficiency of the schools and the transportation and everything should be an investment that would pay off. And it shouldn't depend on how much money each community has for that. And maybe we could get money from federal government to make sure it is equal in every building in the state, and it would be a good investment for efficiencies in the buildings and the transportation themselves.
Yeah, I see your point there. I mean, a lot of our education funding still comes heavily from property taxes, and so it does end up being dependent upon the community that this school is serving. And there is a lot of money that can be saved just through energy efficiency. Buildings account for, I think, 40% of energy usage in the country. And so the more efficient we can make our buildings operate, we're going to be saving money. And here's the other thing. This is why it's so important to be doing this in the public sector. Those things do not serve our mission, right? We have to have buildings that are heated. We have to have buildings that are cool. But heating and cooling buildings is not the mission of public schools. It's not the mission of government, right? It's something that is necessary to do, but we really have almost like a sacred obligation to do a good job of spending as few of the public's resources on things that are not actually serving the government mission. Because if we are wasting money there, then we're hurting our ability to actually serve the mission, which is, I mean, that's what our schools are there for. We want to educate everybody so we have good informed citizens going forward. So it's a good point. Again, the policy-wise on the divide of which chunk of government the money comes from and how big of that chunk is, something that's outside of our purview. But that's exactly, the spirit of your question is exactly why we're doing this. So I thank you for that. Is there a question over here? Okay. Go ahead, Ned.
Okay, so the federal government says for nonprofit organizations cannot be political. And the Iowa Public Television is only allowing two parties in the state that are operating to have a platform. All other parties that are running the state of Iowa cannot get a voice. Me, last year, I tried to get a campaign on 89 in the Riverville that is part of the community college here at Iowa Western. I couldn't put an ad on the radio station because of the federal government won't let nonprofit be political. So Western Iowa Community College is following law, and you have an entity that is being political for the two major parties. That's the Iowa Public Broadcast Association is breaking the law, federal law. So just want to point that out. And the follow-up on her question on schools, I see schools as a big sporting complex or a big basement job, where you see schools as. So that's my 2 cents for that. And anybody else want to follow up on me?
Public radio does not sell advertising, so that's why you can't buy an ad on public radio facility for them to sell advertising, they sell sponsorships.
But I've seen political ads on Nebraska television before.
Do we have any more questions for Auditor Sam?
If some of the great creative minds in the county governments come up with new ideas, would you add them to the pie chart?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's another piece of this, right? We are going to err towards being over-inclusive. So if somebody sends us an idea and we're like, it's probably not gonna work for a lot of counties. Well, it's gonna work for others, so we're gonna put it in, right? Just because something doesn't work for everyone is not a reason to exclude it here. The idea is, I know that there are people who are working in county government and city government every single day who are doing a good job, who want to do good work. It's why they ran, right? But at the same time, they're doing their work. A lot of them have a full-time job outside of that. You got family. Maybe you try to have one hobby to keep you human in addition to that, right? We can't have people in county and city government and in state agencies who are experts on everything, right? The more opportunities we can give them to look at a piece of paper that we put in front of them and have it spark a little bit of curiosity or a little bit of interest in a good idea, the better. And so we're going to be over-inclusive because you never know what ideas might resonate with the county or won't. But yeah, if you look at the top of the first page, I think it says that if you have emails or ideas, you can email them to Lillian Sanchez. But yeah, that's the idea, is we want to have somebody in the office, and she's been in charge of this project, who can take those ideas in, look at them, we can talk about them, and most likely, unless it's a really specific circumstance for a really specific issue, we're going to probably want to include them, yeah. So anything that Potawatomi County has done over the last 15, 20 years that turned out well, and you can show, how much money it saved, we want to hear about it, absolutely, yeah.
If we don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap up here and probably stick around for a few minutes if you want to go up to Auditor Sam individually. And thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, everybody. I think that one's in my car. Glad you made it. Absolutely. What are you going over there for today?
I was supposed to be in Des Moines for a county report, but he's got a soccer tournament on that morning. I'll just head in the office for a couple hours. Then bail.
Thanks for your time on the phone. Yeah, I do appreciate it.
Are we riding together?
What's that? Oh, yeah. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, in other states and other countries. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
They had a performance prostitute.
Is that right? That's right. What are you doing now?
She's been working in,
Do you know,
Yeah.
it's an investigation.
Yeah.
here, talking to your office, and
That's right. Thanks for coming out.
I wanted to give you a
Sure. Good, you're good, Brian.
from Molly Phillips last August, telling me they weren't gonna give me.
Can I see your letter?
Yeah, I've got it over here. Yeah.
stuff drainage.
What do you think?
I thought this one.
Don't worry, it's all right.
Oh, so just pay it off.
Did you have a
Someone called and said, no.
I did not. So we need to.
Well, as I told them, so we get 70, we get 2% based on the category. Worked out to 42, so it's $840 more, I think, $1,000.
So I was health insurance, the obligation for United and the state have.
7%, which is not too bad. Well, 2025, the one I'm saying, that's $550.
You know,
Regulations like 330. Yeah, we're increasing on every. I know. So I don't see.
Yeah,
I mean, Sue.
Now it's changed.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
just
I don't know what this is. People want lower taxes. You ask them that question, you want lower taxes? Who's gonna say no? Yeah. Yeah.
Who's my case manager for this one?
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's said that they do it on the ground, so they 5%. So they want lower taxes.
All that is up
Which
there.
will I'll say.
Now it's
Like lower taxes.
within what I am. So, kind of up in the air.
I gotta get with him.
Just keep.
Better than what started out.
The ones I checked, the ones that
Hey, yeah, thank you for coming out, really appreciate it.
Thank you. See you later.
So the ones that I didn't,
Okay.
the $50,000, and I run for office, asking for campaign contributions. So I told the media this, so everyone knows I'm just an average citizen. So I'm never gonna meet the 50,000, and I don't believe the code forced me to be a collector of money. It's almost akin to a paycheck.
Well, I mean, the piece of this is, so, if your idea is you shouldn't have to raise money, well, then that's a catch-22. And this one, I mean, a lot of times pollsters don't include third parties. So,
Well, I wasn't a third party last time. I was a major party candidate.
a third party in the sense that you were not a Democrat or a.
Right, but in the Iowa code, there's nothing about third party. It's political party or non-party political organization. I was a member of a political party, same standing as the
Have you asked
Republicans.
them whether or not they'd be willing to,
I've asked them 3 times to modify their criteria. I've gone to the board 3 times in each election cycle. I go up there and humble myself before the king, ask them to change their criteria, and they tell me to sit down and shut the F up. So,
I don't use those words.
no, but
I get your, I get the drift.
you know, like President Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And if you think I'm a radical, you should see those right-wingers out there, those Trump people. So they're claiming unbridled administrative discretion. They're claiming the right to censor and segregate candidates.
You want to take a picture of it? You don't care if you.
No, you can take
It's the
pictures.
best way to make a
Yeah.
copy of it.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for coming down,
Yeah,
sir.
absolutely. Good to see you. Yeah, what'd you think?
Good.
Good,
I think that's a good thing. I work for the city.
yeah. Good.
I love one thing in here. We'll sweep the floors instead of washing them. Firefighters be running hose on them. I see that really sad.
Yeah. They had a debate for Iowa Press for a lot of he was just they didn't take $50,000. Or the pollsters decided not to.
It's better now.
Yeah.
Wash the floors and all.
How's gonna get 5%, zero, if he's not in the poll. So I explained that to a jury of how it says, what do you do? And all I've asked, I haven't asked for any money, I just asked for a hearing, they won't give me that, so I gotta take it to court.
Oh, yeah.
And that's gonna waste taxpayers' funds, you know, hiring lawyers and the discovery process.
Solar power's on all of it.
Well, we have the photos now, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
have a chance to review it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, it's just, which gotta stop at some point, they have to, because they have orders. They don't have their own. Or if they have to have, there was 16 of us last time, so they could have done David and Cindy, or the David and they were for us and for us.
Oh, that's how often they watch it.
The remedy to it is more speech, not enforcement. That's just a Brandeis. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah,
for
thank
coming.
you.
Go Hawkeyes.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that.
Hey, I'm gonna fundraise. I'm gonna give you.
Oh, you are? Yeah. All right.